"Sir, this lounge is for preferred clients only. You'll need to wait by the ATM." Her voice sliced through the quiet like a wine glass cracking. Polished. Cold. The kind of tone that tried to sound polite but bled superiority. She didn't even look up from her clipboard. The man had just stepped in. Sunlight framed him in the doorway, tailored charcoal suit, spotless shoes, quiet authority in every step. But already eyes turned. A woman with a silver bracelet paused mid-sip from her espresso. A teller straightened behind glass. The soft jazz in the background suddenly felt loud and misplaced. He said nothing. Just walked forward, posture easy. Movement slow like someone used to being watched. His eyes met no one. But his presence? It made the marble tiles feel like they echoed louder. Like the oxygen had shifted. He took a seat in the pristine lounge chairs anyway. The manager, blonde Bob, name tag reading him Wallace, branch lead, clicked her pen, stormed over in a huff. "I'm not sure how you missed the sign, but this area is reserved for priority appointments. You're not on our schedule." Still, he didn't speak. Just leaned back slightly, glanced at his watch. The gold cufflinks on his wrists caught the light. One leg crossed over the other. Measured. Calm. Wallace's voice rose. "Sir, if you don't move, I'll have to involve security. This is a professional environment. If you believe no one should be treated like they're less than human based on how they look, type respect in the comments." He finally spoke. Quiet, crisp. "I'm exactly where I need to be." She blinked. "Excuse me?" From inside his jacket, he pulled out a black leather folder, no logo, just embossed edges. He opened it slowly, revealing a document. Then another. His ID badge clipped to the side shimmered under the overhead lights. Not a debit card. Not a business card. A board pass. Executive level clearance. A small emblem on the corner read, "National Banking Consortium, Board Director Access." Wallace's jaw slackened. From across the room, someone dropped a pen. The espresso lady. Leaned forward. Behind the counter, one of the tellers whispered, "Wait, is that?" Footsteps echoed. 3 sharply dressed men entered from the side door. Their voices carried, joking about golf tee times. But as they turned the corner and saw him, they stopped. Director Jordan. "We were just coming to greet you. Sorry to keep you waiting." One said. Wallace turned pale. The man finally stood. "Good to see you." He nodded to the others, then turned to her. Calm, steady. "I believe I've waited long enough." Final line, "My name is Langston Jordan. I oversee this bank and 30 others just like it." Silence lingered long after the men escorted Langston Jordan to the executive wing. Wallace stood rooted in place, clipboard trembling slightly in her grip. Her throat worked, trying to swallow something heavier than shame. The staff avoided her gaze, especially the tellers who now looked at her like she'd become a cautionary tale. But Wallace still had her title, still had her office, still had access to the systems. She snapped her fingers at one of the junior reps. "Get me the visitor log from this morning, now." Behind closed doors, Langston didn't mention the incident. He never did. He moved through the glass-walled conference room like someone used to being doubted until it no longer mattered. But the whispers were already moving faster than emails. 2 hours earlier. Same bank, same suit, different eyes. Langston had entered quietly. No bodyguards, no fanfare. Just a slim briefcase in one hand and a smile that didn't ask permission. He knew exactly what he looked like to people like Wallace. Not poor, just unimportant. And he'd learned long ago that people often assumed your power based on how loud you announced it. So he stopped announcing it. At MIT, they called him the ghost in the lab, a silent genius who coded faster than anyone in the AI division, but rarely spoke in class. One professor said he had quiet thunder. Langston never corrected him. He built 3 banking security firms before turning 30. Sold the last one during a 4-minute Zoom call. The buyer never even asked what he looked like. Langston didn't care. He preferred to move silently. Back in the present, Wallace sat in her office, teeth grinding. She opened Langston's profile on the internal system. Langston Ezra Jordan, Executive Director. Board access. Her eyes scanned the screen like it was betraying her. Her stomach flipped. She picked up the phone. Dialed HR. "I need to log a concern," she said. "There's been an incident involving a breakdown in communication." Her voice sugar-coated it, because in her world, language could still be a weapon. And power, real or fake, still came down to perception. Meanwhile, Langston met with the bank's senior team. They smiled, laughed, showed charts and growth reports, but his expression stayed steady, cordial, respectful, watching. He saw it all. Where the money flowed, which neighborhoods were too risky, which branches were underfunded, and which managers got endless second chances. He'd been here before. Not in this branch. But at this moment, when the room quieted, he said simply, "We need to talk about equity across all communities." There it was. No fireworks. No rant. Just gravity. One of the board members nodded slowly. Another scribbled something in their notes. Back on the main floor, Wallace returned to her desk with forced composure. Her eyes tracked every whisper, every glance not meant for her. 2 tellers had already closed their screens. When she passed, she tried to reset. Control the narrative. She rehearsed the apologies she might have to deliver, polite, professional, regret without admission. But something in her still believed this wasn't her fault, that he should have said who he was, that he had made it harder. That racism didn't come with her name on it. Meanwhile, Langston passed through the branch once more, briefcase in hand. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to, but the air shifted around him again, just like it had when he walked in. A security guard straightened his back. A customer nodded in respect without knowing why, and Wallace, still standing stiff near the vault, gripped the edge of her counter, like it was the only solid thing left, because, even with all her systems and access and carefully managed perceptions, she knew something now. He didn't need to raise his voice to silence a room. It started with a glance, then a whisper, then a coffee cup left half filled as 2 employees paused mid-shift, pretending to clean while they talked under their breath. "You heard what he said?" "I saw it." Wallace turned gray. "Girl. No wonder she's been pacing all morning." Langston's name wasn't in the official emails, but it was everywhere else, threaded through Slack chats, passed between locked phones, mouthed in break rooms. Langston Jordan, board director. By noon, the vibe in the branch had shifted. Not in volume, no one said anything out loud, but in posture. In rhythm. The tellers moved faster for black clients. The receptionist stood up straighter, asked for last names, with less attitude. One customer, a black woman in a floral blazer, was greeted like royalty, though no one knew why. She walked out smiling, holding her receipt like a trophy. Wallace noticed. She sat behind her glass office door, pretending to read a memo while watching the floor with the intensity of a hunter out of season. Employees avoided eye contact. One associate, Marcus 22, quiet, always early, did something subtle. He shifted the reserved, clients-only sign, tipped it back just a little, made it harder to read. Less hostile, less exclusionary. Wallace saw it. Said nothing, but her jaw locked tight. Upstairs, Langston moved through another set of numbers: regional audits, fund allocations, hiring ratios. He spotted the patterns instantly. Branches in affluent white neighborhoods had 3 times the community investment. Approvals compared to those in Black or immigrant communities. Same credit scores. Same risk. Different decisions. He leaned forward. We're not in compliance with federal equity standards. The room hushed. Someone coughed. Another sipped water too fast. Langston continued. Either we fix it ourselves or someone else will fix it for us. Not a threat, a fact. Meanwhile, back on the floor, a small symbolic moment unfolded. A black father walked in holding his young daughter's hand. He looked uncertain, probably used to long waits and clipped voices. Wallace was about to say something, her lips parting in that performative tone she used when trying to sound nice. But before she could, Marcus, the same junior rep, stood up. Sir, right this way. I've got you covered. He led them to the premium desk. Wallace blinked. The father looked surprised. Then I was grateful. The little girl smiled up at Marcus, like he was magic. Wallace turned on her heel and stormed into her office. She slammed the door, but not before. The security guard flinched slightly. She opened her laptop and began typing furiously to regional HR. I'm concerned that team behavior has become inconsistent and disruptive since the director's visit. Requesting guidance on restoring procedural discipline. She stared at the screen, didn't hit send. Something in her knew it would backfire, because the problem wasn't chaos. The problem was clarity. Everyone had seen what power looked like in a suit they didn't expect, and once people see, they don't unsee. Later that day, a new customer walked in, young, hoodie, lokes tied back. Looked around, cautious. Wallace's eyes narrowed, but Marcus greeted him, smiled. We've got you. Man, no rush. He offered him water. Wallace fumed, not because Marcus broke rules, but because he was following a new one now. Dignity comes first. By closing time. No formal changes had been made, but the room had changed. It moved differently, like the echo of a footstep that no one forgot. Marcus quietly replaces the preferred clients only plaque with a new one he made himself. All clients deserve respect. He taped it beneath the glass counter. Not loud, but visible. No one removed it. Wallace walked past it twice, didn't say a word. But her silence said everything. The email was finally sent. Wallace didn't add pleasantries this time. Regional leadership, urgent concern. Since the director's unannounced visit, multiple staff members have begun deviating from standard protocol, prioritizing personal discretion over client tiers. I recommend disciplinary review for Marcus, client services, and request a formal reminder on operational boundaries. She sat back, exhaled through her nose. Her fingers tapped the desk. She had framed it carefully, no mention of race. No mention of Langston by name, but the intent was clear. Put the power back in her hands. The reply came faster than she expected. From E. Monroe, Office of the Board. We are aware of Mr. Jordan's visit and have received independent performance reports from that location. We are currently conducting a broader audit of customer service practices across branches. In the meantime, please refrain from implementing disciplinary action or structural changes without prior clearance. She blinked. Read it. Her lips parted, then tightened. They were watching her now. And worse? They were listening to him. Upstairs, Langston sat in a quiet back room lit by skylight. He wasn't gloating. He didn't have to. The internal reports had started coming in: customer satisfaction, referral growth, employee morale. The branch's numbers, her branch, were trending upward. It wasn't a revolution. Not yet, but it was measurable and undeniable. Langston drafted one message to internal strategy team: subject, site review. Follow-up: noticed significant morale and service quality improvement when employee discretion is empowered. Recommend pilot program for 3 branches starting with this one. Let's monitor change from results, not resistance. He signed it with a simple L. Jordan, board director, downstairs. Wallace tried another route. She cornered Marcus in the hallway near the break room. "You've been bold lately," she said, voice dripping with restrained condescension. Marcus didn't smile. "Just doing my job, ma'am." "With interpretation," she snapped. "Not everything needs a personal touch. Customers respect professionalism, not emotion." He tilted his head. Funny, Mr. Jordan seemed to respect both. Her nostrils flared. She leaned in. "Be careful, Marcus. Favor isn't the same as protection. Don't confuse the two." But he didn't respond, didn't blink. Just held her gaze. Back upstairs, Langston walked the corridor, watching people move. A white associate paused to hold the door for a black client. One she'd ignored last week. Subtle, but real. He pulled out his phone, sent one line. "Progress isn't always loud." By Friday, Wallace made her boldest move. She reinstated the preferred clients, only sign in extra bold print, posted procedural flowcharts behind the counter, sent out a memo about returning to structured, high-performance standards. But it didn't land the way it used to. Marcus ignored it. Another associate didn't print it. The receptionist left the sign half hidden under some flyers. The energy was shifting, and she couldn't reverse it, because now people believed they were allowed to do better. Langston returned quietly that afternoon. Not to inspect, not to command. Just to watch. He sat in the same chair he'd been denied last week, crossed his legs, scrolled through his phone. When Marcus saw him, he nodded, but didn't rush over. Langston preferred it that way. A manager from another branch entered and greeted him. Wallace watched from her office, shoulders tight. This time, she didn't move, didn't interrupt, because this time, she was no longer the loudest authority in the room. It wasn't loud. There were no press releases, no town halls, no sudden pink slips, but day by day, the branch changed, and Langston never raised his voice. The first shift came in the form of a spreadsheet. Sent at 6:02 m. Before most employees even stirred. It broke down approval rates by zip code, redlining patterns hidden in polite algorithmic language. Langston didn't accuse anyone. He just showed the math. Alongside it, a new protocol draft. Equity override, discretionary lending review board. A team of rotating staff members would now double-check declined applications from underserved areas. Wallace wasn't on the team. Marcus was. So was a teller named Imani, who'd once nearly been fired for being too friendly. The second shift? A change in greetings. Langston had quietly funded hospitality training for the front desk and security staff. But it wasn't generic. It was specific. How to recognize microaggressions. How to use names instead of assumptions. How to make dignity procedural. It wasn't flashy, but the effect was immediate. A Somali cab driver smiled when someone offered him water instead of rushing his deposit. Black teenager with headphones didn't get asked to take them off, just got offered help with his first savings account. Langston didn't sit in meetings. He sat beside them, observed who interrupted who, noted how often Wallace spoke over her staff. He didn't challenge her directly. He just made it clear she no longer controlled the air. On Tuesday, a mid-level loan officer approached him hesitantly. "Sir, I was wondering if you'd review something. It's not urgent. I heard you knew the approval matrix better than anyone." Langston nodded. "Pull it up." Within minutes, he helped restructure the officer's formula, raising approval rates by 11% without changing risk. The officer stared at the screen. "That's incredible." Langston replied, "It's not magic, it's the intention." Wallace tried to keep up, She began overcompensating, offering forced smiles, correcting herself mid-sentence. Volunteering for committees she used to mock. But the staff could feel it. It wasn't sincere. It was survival. On Thursday, the branch had its highest performing day of the quarter. Not in revenue. In retention. Fewer walkouts. Fewer complaints. More new accounts. And across it all Langston moved like a shadow. Calm, observing, rewriting culture without ever needing a podium. Friday morning. Wallace arrived early. Langston was already there. She hesitated. Approached his desk with a stiff smile. I noticed the new signage. It's different. He looked up. It's accurate. She nodded slowly. You've made quite an impression. But we do have legacy protocols to consider. Langston closed his folder. His tone stayed soft. I don't discard what works. I just remove what harms me. The sentence hung in the air. Later that day, Marcus passed by Langston carrying a folder. I'm ready for that presentation, he said. I added, the demographic overlays like you showed me. Langston nodded. Let the numbers speak for themselves. That afternoon, Wallace called a meeting. Only 4 people showed up. Half the chairs stayed empty. She ended it early. And as she stepped out, she saw something on the wall taped up by an intern. A quote from earlier in the week. Written in black. Marker on printer paper. Power doesn't need a voice when its presence is felt. L. Jordan. She stared at it. Didn't tear it down. Just walked away. The conference room was colder than usual. Not in temperature. Just in tone. 12 chairs. 8 executives. 1 projector hummed softly. The branch performance review was underway, and all eyes were on Wallace as she stood stiffly at the front, clicker in hand. Her smile was brittle, her words over-rehearsed. While our branch has experienced a brief uptick in morale, I do have growing concerns about procedural drift and loss of structured standards. Langston sat near the window, arms folded, saying nothing. Just watching, she continued, trying to code her language in professionalism. Some staff have interpreted recent changes as license to improvise. While well-meaning, this can pose risk to consistency, especially when preferential treatment is perceived. She didn't look directly at Langston, but every sentence pointed toward him like a quiet accusation. One of the regional directors shifted in his seat. Do you have numbers to support that? Risk outcomes, client fallout? Wallace clicked again. We've seen a slight decline in high net worth deposit referrals. Langston finally spoke, calm, unblinking. Have we seen a rise in first-generation account openings? The room quieted. She faltered. That's not part of this segment. It should be, Langston said, because for the first time in 5 years that number just jumped 27%. A murmur went around the table. Langston continued, voice still low. We're not losing standards. We're recentering our purpose. He tapped the desk gently. And for the record, preferential treatment isn't being given. It's being corrected. Wallace's face flushed. She tried to pivot. Well, my concern is that staff are being emboldened to bypass approval ladders and traditional oversight. Langston raised a hand slightly. Would you rather they bypass dignity? The room froze. He let the silence linger just long enough, then added, because what you call oversight, others experience as obstruction. Another exec, a woman from the diversity strategy team, leaned forward. I've reviewed staff reports. Clients of color reported the highest satisfaction ever recorded for this branch. Someone else muttered, and referrals are climbing. Langston nodded slowly. Respect isn't a disruption. It's a multiplier. Wallace's voice cracked for the first time. So what now? We just toss the protocol binder out the window? Langston looked at her. For the first time, directly. No. We rewrite the parts that were never written with everyone in mind. She Blink. And in that moment, it landed. Not because of volume. Not because of spectacle, but because no one came to her defense. The regional director cleared his throat. Effective immediately, I'd like to nominate Langston's equity override model for trial expansion. Seconded. Unanimous. Langston didn't smile. He just looked down, scribbled a note, and passed it across the table. It read, "Empower the quiet ones. They've been watching everything." Outside the conference room, Wallace stepped into the hallway. Like she'd been underwater too long. Her heels clicked against the tile. Fast. Unsteady. She passed the receptionist, who didn't stand up like she used to, past Marcus, who gave a courteous nod, not deference, and for the first time since she'd taken the job, she realized the building no longer moved for her. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal, just a local journalist doing a human interest piece, profiles. In quiet leadership, she called it. She'd heard about Langston through a friend of a friend, someone who worked night shifts at a different branch, and mentioned, "The man who never speaks above a whisper but changes everything." Langston almost declined, but something told him, let them see what quiet looks like when it leads. The article went live on a Tuesday. Published at 7:03 a.m. By 8:15. The branch's front desk had 5 extra walk dash-ins. By noon, it had gone viral. Title: "The Man Who Made a Bank Listen Without Raising His Voice." Byline: Tessa D. Wells. Cityscope Media. It wasn't flashy. It told stories. Like the teenage boy who came in with a crumpled check and walked out with a savings account and a mentor. Or the immigrant couple who said they'd never felt spoken to like equals in a place with marble floors. Langston's name appeared only 4 times, but his presence? It was in every paragraph. Wallace read the article at her desk. Twice. The kif at the diafizi. Words weren't cruel. They weren't even focused on her, but they exposed everything she'd built her power on: silence, control, distance. And now, suddenly those things weren't admired. They were outdated. By midday, Langston's name trended. On LinkedIn, dozens of messages flooded in. "You changed the way I view management. Where can I send my resume? Is your equity model public? We want to try it." Back inside the branch, the energy shifted again, but this time it was different. Not just respectful. Proud. Tellers showed the article on their breaks. Marcus. Read it 3 times. Even the security guard took a screenshot and sent it to his niece. Assad. Young intern printed the title in bold and taped it above the water cooler. "The Man Who Made a Bank Listen." Wallace didn't speak much that day. She moved through the branch like a ghost in her own story. People greeted her, but not with reverence. With formality. The warm edge had left the room, and she knew it, because she no longer sets the temperature. Langston did, and he never had to say a word to do it. That evening, as the sun dipped across the glass windows, Langston sat alone in the back. He didn't scroll. He didn't reply to messages. He just looked around, watched Marcus helping a grandmother navigate online banking, watched a new teller kneel beside a man with vision issues, watched humanity happening. In a place once ruled by protocol, he smiled once, just once, then went back to his notes. One note, written in quiet cursive: "The goal isn't to shine. The goal is to lift." The memo was only 2 pages long, but it landed like thunder across the entire banking network. Subject line: Expansion of Equity Override Program, Phase 1 Rollout. Signed, Langston E. Jordan. Board Directorate included 3 immediate changes. Client: Dignity protocols, no more tiered greetings, no more condescending scripts, community-centered review panels, real humans reviewing risk. With context, discretionary empowerment clause allowing staff to override policies that strip respect. No. Press release. No press conference. Just a message sent quietly. And felt loudly. Branches from Detroit to Dallas responded. One posted Langston's quote on their front door. Another created a first-time client welcome desk with Marcus's photo next to it. And for the first time in company history, tellers began asking, how do we make this space feel equal? Inside Langston's original branch, changes became permanent. The preferred clients only sign was removed from every station. In its place, new signage. If you're here, you belong. Marcus helped design it. Wallace didn't object. She wasn't leading anymore. Now, she was watching. Regional leadership released a formal acknowledgement. We recognize gaps in past practices and thank Director Jordan for pioneering structural empathy in banking. It wasn't an apology. But it was the closest the institution had ever come. And for people like Langston, who'd lived too long in spaces that talked about diversity but practiced hierarchy, it meant something. HR quietly rolled out new mandatory training, bias recognition and client humanity, the Jordan method. Trainers quoted him in the slides. They even asked him to film a 30-second welcome video. He declined. He wrote instead, if your policies require a face to be respected, they're not policies. They're mirrors. News outlets followed up on the original viral article. CNN, NPR, Forbes. They reached out. Langston rarely responded. When he did, his answer stayed the same. I'm not the story. The clients are. Meanwhile, Wallace sat through her own training session. She didn't interrupt, didn't roll her eyes. But the instructor noticed something in her posture, like a structure built on control. Slowly bending toward reflection. At the end, she lingered. Behind, quiet, she didn't speak to Langston, but she looked at the quote on the wall. Again, power doesn't need a voice when its presence is felt. And she whispered, I see it now. On the 1-year anniversary of the pilot program, internal data revealed complaint rates dropped 41%, retention in marginalized neighborhoods rose 63%, first-time account holders up 28% across all racial lines. It wasn't marketing. It was a movement. Langston stayed quiet, stayed working. When asked if he'd like his name on a building, he refused. He offered a different idea. Name it after the intern who first taped that quote by the water cooler. It came in the form of a leak. An anonymous email circulated late Sunday night. Subject line, Jordan overreach, unvetted programs, and policy abuse. The file attached was a neatly arranged PDF, selectively cropped screenshots, vague accusations, internal chats taken out of context. It painted Langston as unstructured. As someone who blurred professional boundaries and disregarded established authority for social theater. And it was sent directly to the board, internal affairs, the media. By Monday morning, whispers had returned, but this time they didn't feel admiration. They felt sharp, cold. Even Marcus noticed. Something's off, he muttered, scrolling through his inbox. Langston had seen it coming. Not the exact attack, but the pattern. When you change the story, someone always tries to rewrite the author. At 9:11 a.m., a formal inquiry was launched. Langston received the email in silence, didn't speak, didn't call anyone. He just closed his laptop and breathed, because it wasn't the first time someone tried to reduce him to a whisper. But something was different now. This time, he wasn't standing alone. By noon, counter statements began appearing organically. Staff from across the country, tellers, managers, security guards submitted letters. Because of Mr. Jordan, I stayed in this job. He saw dignity where others saw data. My father finally opened his first account because Langston made this bank feel human. Even Wallace. Send a message, just one sentence. The system may resent him, but we all needed him. Langston sat with Marcus that afternoon in the empty lounge. I knew it would come, he said softly. Marcus asked, Doesn't it bother you? Langston looked down. Of course it does. But I don't fight with noise. He tapped his temple. I fight with memory. And results. Internal Affairs called for a meeting. Langston arrived early, wore the same quiet suit, the same gold cufflinks. He brought no lawyer, no entourage. Just the truth. He didn't defend himself with passion or emotion. He defended himself with numbers. Charts. Testimonies. Silence that carried weight. At the end, the lead investigator, an older woman who had remained mostly neutral, looked up and said, You didn't build a following. You built a foundation. And with that, the review ended. No charges. No sanctions. Just a single formal notice. Langston E. Jordan retains all authority. Policy innovations will continue. That night, he sat in his apartment, bare walls, soft jazz playing, one lamp on. He looked tired. For once, genuinely tired. Because even when you don't shout, carrying change is heavy. He picked up a note from his desk drawer. Old paper. Faded ink. Written by his mother the day he started college. If the room doesn't see you, don't leave. Make them feel your absence before they even know your name. He folded it, closed his eyes, and smiled. The plaque wasn't gold. It wasn't even mounted high. It sat at eye level, beside the front entrance of the branch, now renovated, softly lit. Open concept. Visitors read it before stepping inside. The Langston Jordan branch, dedicated to quiet power, human dignity, and institutional change in recognition of Director Jordan's impact on equity in banking across America. No speeches. No podiums. Just a quiet crowd on the sidewalk. Employees, customers, strangers, people who had once been ignored, people who now felt seen. Langston wasn't there. He had declined the ceremony. Instead, he watched from across the street, coat collar up, hands in pockets. He didn't need applause. He needed momentum. Inside the branch, Marcus stood proudly in his new role, community engagement lead. He wore a sharp blazer, the same color as the one Langston had worn on that first day. On his lapel, a pin shaped like a scale, balanced. The same pin Langston once tucked into a drawer, now passed on. The atmosphere had changed permanently. Clients were no longer sorted by worth. They were welcomed by name. The teller windows, gone, replaced with circular desks, eye level, equal. A grandmother walked in and was offered tea. A college kid got help with budgeting, no judgment, no jargon. A formerly incarcerated man opened his first account without side eyes or suspicion. Every face in the room reflected inclusion, not exception. Across the city, more branches followed. Within the year, 119 locations implemented the Jordan model. Within 2 years, it became federal policy guidance. Langston refused all interviews, but a quote of his hung in every regional training center. If power can't kneel to dignity, it's not leadership. It's ego, Wallace. She quietly retired 6 months after the program went nationwide. No drama. Just a resignation letter. But she left behind one final act. She renamed the internal mentorship program the Langston Initiative, Teaching Leadership. That listens. No one asked her to. No one expected her to, but she knew. Langston, now semi-retired, worked from a modest office 2 cities away. Still no name on the door. Just a desk, a window, and a team of young minds who called him Coach. He rarely used his title, rarely corrected anyone, because it had never been about being seen. Only about seeing others. One rainy afternoon, a girl 10 years old, hair in braids, walked into the branch with her mom. She stared at the quote near the entrance, reading every word. Who was he? She asked. Marcus leaned down beside her. He's the reason no one ever makes you feel small here. She looked around, smiled. Then held her mom's hand tighter. Final image. Langston walked past the branch at dusk. Unnoticed. He pauses. Sees the reflection of dozens of people inside, laughing, helping, listening. Then continue walking. Calm. Still. Uncheckable.